Welcome to the Big Four Accounting Firms podcast, brought to you by big4accountingfirms.com. I wanted to thank everybody for listening and supporting the podcast. So today I wanted to talk about the way that we can fix the Big Four accounting firms. Those of you listening to this podcast are either leaders in the Big Four accounting firms or one day will be. And there's a lot of issues going on with the Big Four accounting firms, scandals around the world, from KPMG in Europe facing a crisis where they lied to potential regulators, PwC in China with Evergrande, Big Four accounting firms in the US with supporting tax evasion. There's a lot of things going around, but also employee turnover. So over the past couple of years, there's been tons of turnover in the Big Four accounting firms, and I can speak to this because of a lot of people that I know that have left the Big Four accounting firms, or just stories of teams being wiped out. There's also been the layoffs around the world, and there's layoffs still going on today with administrative assistants in the Big Four accounting firms. And I think a lot of this can get solved pretty easily, or maybe not easily, but at least it's worth trying, is by putting the employee first of the Big Four accounting firms. And I don't mean every single employee first, I mean the best employee. Like, who do the Big Four accounting firms really want to keep? And that's who they should work around. Right? But they need to make sure that they really want to keep that person and not focus on trying to keep everybody that wants to stay at the Big Four accounting firms, because the way the Big Four accounting firms work right now is not really to keep the best people. It's to keep the people that fit the system. And the way the system works is that you have to make as much revenue for the firm while also being under budget. And that's one of the guiding principles of the Big Four accounting firms. Ideally, the Big Four accounting firms would be more principled and ethical. And I think certain times they try to be this way. And let me give an example. Let's say that you really wanted to charge a premium at the Big Four accounting firms to your client and do the best job possible. But you weren't going to do certain things. You have to check all the boxes of ethics, of scoping the engagement, and you're actually honest with the client. Like, you're not going to do certain work without billing it. And so that would come up to a certain price. And there's a lot of clients that probably wouldn't be able to pay that price. But even if the Big Four demanded it, then there would be another firm that would bid a lower price, because the Big Four accounting firms aren't necessarily the best at planning or budgeting. So I think that's the problem they would run into there. But I think if there was one Big Four accounting firm that was able to just stand on their principles, stand on their ethics, but also when a crisis hit a client, that they would either stand up for the client or stand up for their principles, then I think that would benefit them over the long term. But besides that, I think the Big Four accounting firms have to figure out the type of employees that they want, and they have to ask them what they want. And if those employees are leaving because it's not sustainable to, at the same time, be client facing and giving the client everything they want while also trying to be under budget, which I think is kind of the madness that drives a lot of people out of the Big Four accounting firms. You can't balance both. And to balance both, you have to really, you have to fool yourself, you have to fool the partner, you have to fool the client, and it's playing this game and putting on different faces, or either that or it's cutting corners, and it just puts you in a weird area, and it's not sustainable for most people. They get to a point where you can't sustain all of this. And also on top of that, your utilization of your own utilization, or if you're trying to do a really good job on all of your clients, it might take a lot longer than was budgeted. You might be working over 100 hours, but you charge way less to clients. And so this is how you drive yourself crazy. It's how most people in the big four accounting firms drive themselves crazy. And you have to read in between the lines from, actually charging your time versus what's budgeted. But I think if the big four accounting firms found their best employees and they were the most ethical and the hardest working people, and they built around that, then I think that's how you save the big four accounting firms. Because right now, the way the big four accounting firms are set up, it's sort of set up around being less ethical. It's set up more towards revenue and towards winning a new client and winning engagements. And if you win an engagement by underbidding, then, well, we'll fix that later. But then the way you fix it later is by being a little bit unethical. So I think, or cutting corners. And when you're cutting corners, you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. You're not auditing engagement the way you're supposed to. You're not providing the tax deliverables that you need to. You're not providing your advisory deliverables that you promised. You're cutting corners. And I think a lot of this has to do with negotiations too. I think the big four accounting firms don't want to have to push a lot of this back on their clients and aren't willing to negotiate. And I think that would also help. I think if the big four accounting firms went back to the clients and negotiated for better contracts and stood on those principles and actually kept their best people and provided really the best service possible, whether it's audit, tax, advisory, then I think that can improve the big four accounting firm. But another problem that people might run into is that a lot of the deliverables the big four accounting firms provide, nobody looks into. But I think that can be counteracted when these scandals arise. And if there was truly one exemplary big four accounting firm, they would stand up in the face of these crises and put out statements right away saying, no, we scoped this properly, we did this properly, we can't counteract all fraud and things like that. And we worked with the client, because if people actually worked with their client on what was possible under the amount of money paid and the scope of the work, then I think the big four accounting firms would be a lot more forthcoming when these scandals arose. The problem is the big four accounting firms, when these scandals arise, they know they didn't do enough work, and they typically find the best way to fly under the radar. For example, what we saw in the UK, where they were just lying to the regulators and withholding documents from them. They knew that they hadn't done enough work, or I believe that's what they knew. It remains to be seen whether they already got penalized for it, so we know that was at least part of the issue. But a lot of times, the big four accounting firms try to fly under the radar, which I think is what they're doing with Evergrande right now. And they just hope that their lawyers will take care of it. They're not confident because they know that they cut the corners. And this isn't only an audit, it's all of the engagements. But I think if the big four accounting firms really were focused on keeping their best employees and they approached their business that way, then I think a lot of these root issues would go away. And that's employee retention, that's the reduction of scandals, pushing back on regulators with false accusations. A lot of this would be possible, and I think the big four accounting firms would be a better place to work. But I think there would also be a lot less bad headlines for the big four accounting firms if that's the way they approached it as well. Those are just some thoughts that I had. That's a podcast for today. Make sure to subscribe to get future updates, and thanks for listening.